Artists such as LL Cool J, Public Enemy, Minor Threat,
Red Hot Chili Peppers, Beastie Boys, System of a Down,
Dixie Chicks, Eminem, Metallica.
Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world.
Green Day, Tom Petty, Joe Strummer, Kanye West, Adele, and many, many more.
This is Rick Rubin. If you're a musician or creative of any kind, you've probably heard of him, but if you haven't, he's talked about as some kind of wise old wizard that's guided every artist to their greatest achievement in the past 40 years. And as a producer myself, I've watched all his interviews, read his book, applied his advice, which has been invaluable, but there's these two ideas that keep coming up that seem to contradict each other. At moments, he'll say something like,
even for the things that I work on, I don't have a set way that I do anything. I come to every project blank. I believe we know close to nothing about anything.
But then later he'll say,
and sometimes we'll even impose our own rules to give something its shape. We're going to make a painting, but we're only going to use green and red.
And that leaves me to wonder, how are you supposed to use both of these at the same time? I didn't understand what he was trying to say, so I kept searching for answers, and I found this Benny Blanco interview, who's another incredibly successful modern producer, and he said,
and I don't ever force the process. I'm never like, we only have 30 minutes to make a song. It has to be a hit.
And when I heard this, I'm like, okay, great. This confirms more of the first thing that Rick said, where you want to be open with no rules and curious to make your best music. But then a few seconds later, Benny also says,
besides when you have a deadline and they're like, we need this song finished.
A song finished, I'm okay with finishing a song, but not creating the idea.
So this hints at certain moments needing maybe one over the other, which is progress, but still not really crystal clear. So I kept searching, and the paradox, or these opposite or contradictory ideas, just kept popping up everywhere.
It's a very mathematical process, actually.
I think what we have is like a toolbox of problem-solving formulas.
There is no plan. We're just going with it. We're letting the music dictate what feels right. Follow the storyline. Think about what you're saying. Really think about what you're saying.
I started to feel like I was caught in this weird paradox of this advice where you're supposed to create with no rules, but then suddenly know when to impose certain rules to make it all work. And after a while, I don't know, I just got this feeling that maybe you just have to do it yourself to understand. So my first attempt was, why don't I just try each of these opposites and see what happens. So the first strategy I tried was creating with no rules. I was completely open and made a ton of musical ideas, but the problem that kept coming up was these ideas wouldn't get finished, and they were across a bunch of different genres and styles, which wasn't really useful if they were going to be released in any sort of manner. So I figured maybe that's just not for me, and I went to the exact opposite approach. I had goals, deadlines, and checklists, but then suddenly I had absolute creative block. I couldn't come up with an idea that was good enough to check all of these boxes. Somehow, in my attempt to understand this paradox, I had combined the worst parts of both strategies together, which really sucked, but made me think maybe there's a way to combine the best parts of both strategies to take advantage of this paradox, but I just couldn't figure it out. And then by complete chance, I was watching this old lecture from an author in Utah, and he just casually mentions in the middle of this lecture that there's two main ways authors tend to write books, but the magic is really finding the balance for you in combining them. And once I heard that, I dropped whatever I was eating because I knew I was about to find my answer. The author that was giving this lecture was Brandon Sanderson, and is one of the most successful fantasy book writers in the current time. He was telling students when he first started to learn how to write, he read a book by Orson Scott Card, and it said he absolutely needed an outline for his story. He would go on a million tangents and be lost without it. And then Brandon read Stephen King's book on how to write. And Stephen King said an outline ruins his story. It destroys the joy of discovering what's going to happen next as he writes it, and he can't possibly do anything with an outline. The parallels to music were overwhelming, but what I really wanted was his method of combination. How did he take the focus of Orson Scott Card's outlining method while still preserving the joy of Stephen King's discovery writing? What he explained is he found that outlining his plot allowed him to focus on the storyline and ensure a great ending, but discovery writing his characters allowed for dynamic and unique personalities to grow. And after hearing that, I thought back to what Benny and Rick were saying, and it started to make sense. They start a song as if they're Stephen King. There's no rules and they're exploring, just searching for anything interesting. But as the song builds, they slowly become Orson Scott Card by implementing different rules and guidelines in order to maintain momentum and progress. And as a practical way to explore this, I took a document that I usually use to study music, and I would pull from it to create rules as I progress through a song idea. You can download this document for yourself in the description if you want it, but the general idea was if I wrote a verse and a chorus, but I was struggling to think of the next section, I would go to my notes and pull a song structure. And then I'd know exactly what next section I needed to make, and I would keep on going. Or if I was spending 30 minutes trying to pick a synth sound, but everything sounded corny, I would go to my notes and I'd make a rule that I can only use the instruments from this one song that's in the same genre and style. The decision would be made for me, and then I continue my progress of the song. This allowed me to channel the thrill of creative experimentation into a reliable and organized system that I ended up expanding upon and calling the bricks, walls, houses, and homes method, which I made another video on, and you could watch that here.